I've been a specialist family barrister from around about 2020, when I targeted my practice from a very mixed, diverse practice covering crime, civil, employment, and family, into one that focused solely on family law. Our practice is very paper heavy. I'm sure that applies to large parts of the bar. All of us have had that experience of being up till 1 a.m, ploughing through bundles that seem to go on and on and on. It was the only platform that I could find, or that I could see on a routine search, that let you annotate into a bundle with a stylus, that let you do a lot of the similar functionality I had found in Adobe, but on an iPad. So you could highlight text, you could use your bookmarking, you could search for particular words, using the OCR function. So it meant that I was starting to get the things that I was becoming dependent on in other programs available to use on a tablet. But then it had the additional features. It had those little where you can kind of screen grab part of the document and have that hyperlink. So it saved you having to write it all out by hand. It meant that you could have multiple bundles accessible on your iPad without having to worry about where you were storing them or how you were moving between them. And it had the additional benefit of being able to have loads of documents as part of one project. So you weren't having to have 8, 9, 10, 11 PDFs open at one go. You could have them all just as a list of documents that you would switch between in the same way that you would had they been included in the bundle in the first place. I will say that liquitex has obviously gone on to do additional features, which has meant that it's become more useful. The one that I will use in absolutely every single bundle or brief that I dissect, if I can call it dissecting it, is the ability to highlight everything in different colors and to switch between that very quickly. I'm definitely one of those old school barristers who color codes absolutely everything. Being able, as I said, to kind of lasso, I think is the word, certain sections of a page, and then have those moved across and just have those hyperlinks so you can see the chunk of text that you are referring to without having to all write it out by hand, but you can jump to that section really quickly in the bundle. I found that particularly helpful when I've used the workspaces, and now you can have more than one workspace. So when I'm preparing for a fact-finding hearing, which to us in the family bar is akin to a criminal trial, but with a lower standard of proof, means that I can start pulling out information, allegation by allegation. So as I read through the bundle and I see that in a witness statement from this witness, they've referred to this incident here, I can pull that information out and just have it there. That's part of workspace 1 for that allegation. As I go through and I see the witness statement in response, I can pull out that information, have it there. If there's photographs, I can link to the photos. If there's GP disclosure, medical disclosure, police disclosure, for example, I can have all of that in one workspace so that when I go back and I go, right, what is the evidence that I have for allegation 1? I can see that all listed in one place in a nice, tidy, easy to find format. So I found that incredibly useful. And that's something I use all the time now for fact-finding hearings, definitely. Ink links I use a lot when I suppose when I'm working through and I'm realizing the issues that I need to address. So I will have ink links in everything. So for example, if there's a little phrase in an order and I think, oh, I'm going to need to come back to that to address it, I'll have the ink link and I'll make a note to myself and say, well, where are we with this ? And then there'll be an ink link so I can go back to it and say to the solicitors, for example, I can see this order says this, where are we with it? And it means that I can then have a shopping list of the things that I need to address, either by clarifying instructions or in my conference with a client, and I can readily find why I've said that this is something that needs to be addressed. If 2 days down the line I can't quite remember it, you just click on the ink link and it takes you there. There's no way that I would be able to use liquitex in the way that I do without the pencil, because I annotate really heavily into my bundles when I'm going through them, and I put in my comments, and there's lots of things where I will make a note to say that I need to follow up on this or clarify this, or actually have we addressed it. And I just don't think that you'd be able to do that properly. I can't see how you would do the links, whether it's ink links or the other links, without the pencil. The pinch search is really helpful because you see the search results in context rather than just skipping through and looking for the word. You can jump to the relevant part that you're looking for and that you know you're looking for far quicker.
Perhaps go back to the specific features that you've described, the factors that drew you to the app.
The ink links is probably the most valuable, because no matter what you do to that bundle, you can dissect the information into a way that will always make sense to you, no matter what the hearing is, no matter how last minute the instruction comes in. You can very quickly just mark where the really, really important bits are that you know you're going to need to come back to. And it's quick. And you can do it in your shorthand, and you can condense it all onto one page, and it's so customizable that it will work with whatever you do, no matter what you're working on. The multiple workspaces has become really helpful as for fact-finding hearings. When you are working for fact-finding hearings and you are trying to get your head around what the evidential landscape looks like for each of the allegations you're dealing with, or even just for the fuller picture understanding of what that relationship looks like, or what the lived experiences of that family looks like, you can start to group the evidence as you come across it in a far easier to navigate way by doing it into those multiple workspaces. So once you've thrown all of your evidence into your workspace, you can then go back into it and reorganize the evidence into the way that I do it into the way that I'm likely to approach it in examination or cross-examination, because then I know, right, I'm probably going to have to refer to this little piece of evidence if I need to take the witness to it. And therefore, I can align the evidence to match the order in which I'm going to go through my questions, so that when I come onto that topic, I can work through it. And actually, it ends up being a really helpful prompt to keep you on track in your witness handling without becoming too dependent on your notes, because you can see the evidence, you can see where you're going to go. So it becomes an almost informal roadmap for your cross-examination or your examination in chief when you have it laid out in the order that you want to work with it. I do sometimes make annotations into my skeleton, or we have position statements where I will mark a little reminder to myself, particularly if it relates to directions, or it relates to things that I need to remember to address the judge about. That's when I will make annotations as we go. But I don't tend to do anything in paper because I will just lose it. So unless it goes into the workspace I'm on liquitex, or it's on my written note on my laptop, it just doesn't exist.
I'm interested in how you use liquitex to collaborate with others in your legal team, your instructing solicitors, maybe even also your fellow barristers.
I would love to be able to say I use it to collaborate more. My solicitors are slow to come around to the wonderful world of digital. I'm not sure they're quite there just yet. I have waxed lyrical about liquitex to other barristers and said to them that if you're planning to move to remote working, this is how you do it. This is what you should be looking for. This is why I have gone to this and I find it really works. But I haven't found a way to collaborate or work collaboratively using liquitex. I think part of that is also just the way that we at the bar work, certainly I think on the less complicated cases, because it is often just you on your own going to court. You don't often have a solicitor sitting behind you. You don't normally have a solicitor sitting with you in conferences, for example. And so it's just you and the client who will be there in court dealing with things, and you tend to update your solicitors afterwards with an attendance note or something similar. And so really it's your annotations into the bundle that you need for that hearing, rather than needing necessarily to work more collaboratively in that process.
What is the nature of the advantage that using liquitex gives you over the previous methods that you may have used to analyze and take notes? Is it saving time, or how would you describe those benefits?
definitely saving time, but it's also understanding things better, because you have the ability to flag information that in the back of your mind you think this might be relevant later, but you don't know why. So you can just kind of make a quick marker to it, and you can kind of just save it for later. And then by the time you've managed to read through the bundle, however big it may be, 350 to 1,000 pages beyond, and you think, oh, I remember seeing something about this somewhere, and it's normally just a little nugget of information, but it will color your submissions in a different way, or it's something that you know is likely to come up or be brought up by a witness if they're being particularly difficult, or is something that you want to be able to put to bed really quickly. You have the ability, because it's not about adding 40,000 post-it notes to a paper bundle. You can just have this random page on liquitex that's, 6 scroll pages along and 4 down to the bottom, where you just kind of throw all of the information that you think might be useful, but you don't know why. And you know where to find it. You can come back to it later. And so when you're reading through bundles, you can get a much better picture about what this case is going to look like, because you're not worrying about what do I do with this little piece of information? Where do I classify it? How do I categorize it? You just read it for what it is, flag what you think might be useful, and then you can start to pull it all together, because you can start to paint that picture and draw the links and the information that you've pulled out in different ways into a much clearer picture, into a way that you think, right, this is how I'm running this now. Following the recent case law guidance that we've had from the family courts that have come in over the last couple of years, what the courts are also doing in a fact-finding hearing is not just looking at the limited picture of the allegations that have been specified. The court is also looking at the overall picture. What are the patterns? What are the trends that you see within this relationship, and the behaviors that have been demonstrated or displayed by each of the parties in this relationship? And to be able to do that, you need to be able to start finding those in the bundle. You have to be able to look to the broader evidence to be able to do that. And so the features that you have, where you can have those excerpts where you take out part of a page and you say, right, this is something that's really helpful, means that you can paint that much fuller picture that you wouldn't otherwise really be able to do unless you sat and typed out every single little bit and pulled it all together in a typed or handwritten document. And being able to shuffle the information around means that you can kind of process it in your own mind so that you can paint that picture. The other thing that we have to do quite often is we have to take expert reports, or we have to take initial recommendations or assessments. And when you're preparing for procedural hearings or directions hearings, what you're looking for is a headline of those recommendations. What are the 6 things that this person has recommended? And being able to do those excerpts where you can just say, well, here's, these are the 3 paragraphs that are relevant. I now have these recommendations front and center in one place. Because often they don't have a very useful summary, or if they do, the summary is lacking. It's missed stuff out as you go. The other way that helps to digest it is color coding and highlighting, so that when you go back through it, you can find it. But equally, having color coding in the notes that you make and the annotations you make, it means that I can go through and you make remarks to say, well, this isn't helpful. What are we going to do about it? And it means when you're scrolling back through to look for it, you know what that page is going to start looking like. You can find it much quicker, but you also know where you're looking for stuff, because you've been able to engage with that information, and you can be far more destructive with your bundle, because you can just undo it. You can undo it in just lasso and delete. It's quick, it's easy. Also being able to do that onto the kind of digital excerpts that you have, because you can take it out and you can have it in its raw form, but then you can annotate over that without affecting the bundle, and where you can copy and paste that same excerpt into different workspaces, you can have different annotations onto each one, which is really helpful as well. The size of the bundles you get is just huge, and you're dealing with so much information that sometimes you just need to be able to search for keywords to make sure that you've got everything. That's never going to work unless you've got OCR. And I certainly don't want to have to close a bundle, reopen it in a different program and re-import it because it hasn't been OCR'd. So being able to do that here has been really helpful. The other thing that's been really helpful as well is that liquitex flags when a document hasn't been OCR'd and then asks if you want to OCR it. So on the ones where you weren't paying attention and you didn't notice it hadn't been OCR'd, you can then fix it before you have to then do all those additional steps to get it into a readable, usable format. I tend to, if it's just a procedural hearing, I tend just to have my simple single workspace. That's where I throw everything into. And you get used to it. So you've got, I have my party names and I've got my links to any special adaptations we have to make to the court process or to the hearing to make sure that the witnesses and the parties can participate properly. I then tend to have a separate page where I just put down all of my thoughts, and it's color coded into directions that I think we're going to need, questions I need to ask the client, things I need to clarify with the solicitors, and that's just all in there. And then as those things are answered, I either update the cross links or I just erase the information to say it's been dealt with, I don't need to deal with it anymore. For the more complicated hearings, for final hearings, fact-finding hearings, which are akin to trials in the family court, I tend to have multiple workspaces. They're all color-coded to match the allegations or the themes of the allegations. And it means that I can front load the evidence collection, because it means I can start collecting or pooling evidence that I think is relevant to particular allegations or particular issues into workspaces for each of those allegations or issues. And so when I'm going through the bundle, I can start to draw together everything that I think might be relevant. It means that you end up with a really, really detailed cross-reference of everything that might be relevant. And it means that you are then armed with this arsenal of information that you can selectively use. You're not always going to use all of the evidence, but you know where to find it if you get a witness that throws you a curveball or a judge that asks you a question that you weren't expecting, because you know that the information you need is something you've seen. You know it's going to be in a particular workspace because it relates to that issue. And you just have to scroll down 1 or 2 or 3 times to find that little nugget that you were looking for. I use the workspaces for those functions more in the prep than in the delivery. And that's because I use them to help me understand what the evidential landscape looks like. It means that I can have all of the evidence that I think is relevant to a particular allegation in one place. I can shuffle it around, I can have things side by side, so that I can then run a comparison to understand where the issues are, where the discrepancies are, what's helpful to us, what isn't. And then I can build the case theory using that, and I can then build my cross or my examination in chief on that basis. You can have the same thing that you would have, the same comfort that you would have if you had a bundle, but you don't have to print it out. You don't have to, travel all the way into chambers to go print out massive bundles. You can have 4, 5, 6 bundles on the go at any time, so you can be working on multiple cases at any time with just your iPad. You don't have to worry about leaving it on the train because it's all secure. You can put a password on it. You can manage that if you happen to lose your iPad. And so it's just that thing that it's just easier and quicker and safer to have, but it gives you the same customizable features that you'd have if you were working from a paper bundle.